The scholars, they don't accept these things. They think it's mythology because they're materially contaminated. Only those who are free from material contamination can actually relish these narrations. So many scholars on the Vedas, but Krishna says, Vedanta Krit Veda Chaham. I am the compiler of the Vedas, I'm the knower of the Vedas. So the purpose of the Vedas is to know Krishna, develop our love for Krishna. The people who don't have any bhakti and are attached to material life and sense gratification, they can't appreciate this. So here it says, just by hearing about the glories of Lord Ananta, vanquishes all dirty contamination, the modes and material nature. And then it says, thus they are benefited by going back home, back to Godhead. So again, we heard this narration, so everybody's going back home, back to Godhead. We hope. The contamination in the heart of a conditioned soul is like a huge accumulation of garbage created by the three modes, tamagun, rajagun. This contamination becomes manifest in the form of lusty desires and greed for material possessions. Unless one receives transcendental knowledge and disciple succession, there's no question of becoming purified of this contamination. So Vrindavan, we knew whenever we go, everywhere we go in Vrindavan, you see an accumulation of garbage. Although they're making so many attempts to clean up the city, they ban plastic bags and they're always cleaning, but still it hasn't been done yet. And most of India is like that. But this accumulation of garbage in the heart has been there from time immemorial. So this process, cleansing the heart, Chaito Darpanam Marjanam, Lord Chaitanya says, by chanting the holy name of the Lord, all that is, one purifies one's heart. But then he says, oh my Lord, you have appeared in your holy name. Unfortunate as I have no attraction for them. Because of material contamination, even if we're been a devotee for 30, 40 years, still the contamination of Rajagun and Tamagun is still influencing the personalities with lusty desires and greed for material possessions. But in Upandesamrita, Rupa Goswami says that there are 6 things that spoil one's devotional service: eating more than necessary, or collecting for more funds than required, over-endeavoring for mundane things that are difficult to attain, talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matters, practicing the scriptural rules and regulations only for the sake of following them, not for the sake of spiritual advancement, or rejecting the rules and regulations of scriptures and working independently or wisdomlessly, associating with worldly-minded persons who are not interested in Krishna consciousness and being greedy for mundane achievements, or pratista, wanting name and fame. The second one is to over-endeavor for mundane things that are very difficult to attain. That's like building big skyscraper buildings or something other than a temple. So we have to be very careful in our devotional service that we don't allow these contaminations to come in our heart. Eating more than necessary or collecting more funds than required, especially is a warning that one should not take too many disciples, because one can become overwhelmed by accumulation of wealth and disciples, and that spoils one's devotional service. And then one becomes enamored by these things, and we see that people who took up the position of gurus, they fell away from they had to give up their position, fell away, lost their taste for devotional service, because they weren't careful. They allowed these anarthas to enter their heart. Described Guru Krishna Prasadi by Bhakti Lata Beach, that at the time of initiation, the beads, the seed of devotional service, is sprouted in the heart. And along with this, so when you have a seed, you have a sprout, a creeper begins to grow. And along with the creeper, there are also weeds. And so you have to be a diligent gardener. Mali, we have a gardener here who goes around taking out the weeds so the garden looks nice. So we have to be a diligent gardener like that, but sometimes the weeds look like the same species as the bhakti creeper, and one doesn't recognize them. And then the creeper eventually disappears, and the person loses his taste for chanting, loses his taste for devotional service, and ends up leaving the movement. So this is a question many always ask, why such and such left the movement. He was such a great devotee, did so much service. But that's the reason. It's nothing unclear. It's very clear that there's a reason if someone leaves Krishna consciousness, because he wasn't careful about his the development of Krishna consciousness. So Sanatana Goswami says Krishna consciousness is not just a practice of the mind, but we also have to practice Krishna consciousness with our minds. In other words, we have to always be hearing about the glories of the Lord, and always be chanting as much as possible. Even in Purushottamas, this month of Purushottamas, so many devotees are chanting 64 rounds, which is very good. But again, Haridas Thakur says, if you chant 64 rounds and you don't feel one drop of prema, or one drop of bliss from the holy name, that means you still have full of material desires. You still want to enjoy the material world. If you chant 64 rounds of Nam, Shuddha Nam, then you're going to be exhibiting ecstatic symptoms, crying, your hairs, body on your hairs will be standing on end, you'll be, voice will be choked up. Well, we don't see that. People chant 64 rounds, we don't see the ecstatic symptoms because they still want material enjoyment. They want both the best worlds. So one has to be completely pure, free from all material contamination. Anyabilasita sunya, kanakarma labitam, anukulena krishnasno, bhakti uttamam. This is the definition of pure bhakti. Free from gyan, free from karma. So, one gopi told another gopi, if you have any attachment to society and friendship and love, then don't go see that boy, Govinda. So, the gopis of Vrindavan, as soon as Krishna played his flute, they were taking prasadam or taking care of their child or doing so many things. They merely left everything to Krishna. Just go and see Krishna. Because they were completely surrendered to Krishna. And they had no other interest. So the devotee, if we have no other interest, but interest is be Krishna conscious. So we should be careful not to get spoiled our devotional service by doing these 6 things. Especially, we should not talk about mundane things. especially on the Ekadasi. Ekadasi, we should be very careful not to talk about mundane things. It says that in Prema Vivarta. So those are the negative side of devotional service. Now the positive side is we should be enthusiastic, endeavor with competence, be patient, act according to regulated principles, abandon the association of non-devotees, follow in the footsteps of previous acharyas. These 6 principles undoubtedly assure complete success, pure devotional service. So this is the way we're talking about being free from the contamination in the heart of a conditioned soul. So by practicing devotional service in this way we can get gradually, it's a gradual process. We can't think that the child who's born, the child doesn't walk immediately. He has the ability to walk, and the ability to become Krishna conscious is also in our heart. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema, or Krishna Prema is dormant in everyone's heart, but we're covered now by the modes of nature, so we're not Krishna conscious. So the child will try to walk, but he will not be successful very first try. Keeps falling down, but after some time he can pick himself up. So in the same way, we practice devotional service, but there may be stumbling blocks on the path of devotional service. But we must endeavor with confidence and be enthusiastic and go on with our devotional service no matter what happens. We should not give up the process of devotional service. And we should follow in the footsteps of previous acharyas. These will help us to become Krishna conscious. Following in the footsteps does not mean imitating, though. The ISKCON of Vrindavan, they only slept 1.5 hours every day. They ate a handful of fried chickpeas, some dry bread. Raghunath Das Goswami, he took 1 cup of chach, buttermilk, every other day. And someone brought him a cup that was a little bigger, thinking he wasn't getting sufficient nutrition, and he just threw it away. So what do you think, I'm a sense gratifier? So we can't imitate the 6 Goswamis, but we should try as much as possible to minimize the eating and sleeping. It's like we just read, overeating is the cause of fall down. We should not want to follow the demands of our senses. We should use our senses. Nirbandhan Krishna Sambandhe Yukta Vairagya Uchite. So we should use our senses, use everything. We can use the microphone, we can use a cell phone, we can use a laptop computer, but not for our sense gratification, for helping us advance in Krishna consciousness, helping us communicate with devotees, helping us in so many ways. It's not condemned. Just like my Prabhupada said, the Mayavadis, when you offer Mayavadis money, they go like this. Prabhupada said, when they offer us money, we go like this. Because we utilize that money for spreading Krishna consciousness, for building temples and building and preaching Krishna, printing books in this way. The Krishna consciousness movement can be spread all over the world. So the final statement here is confirmed here in unless one receives transcendental knowledge and disciplic succession, there is no question of becoming purified of this contamination. So you should always hear by reading Srila Prabhupada's books, especially Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita. And you know that Srila Prabhupada is the founder Acharya of ISKCON, and he He didn't come to America to give something imaginary. Neither did Sri Vyasadeva compile the Vedic literatures to give something imaginary. Like people think, like scholars say, this is mythology. These are not the true stories. But why would they waste their time giving false information? It's not imaginary. It's all true. But we have to purify our hearts. In this way, we will relish. We should be, it says, by service to the pure devotee, then one gains an affinity for hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. When we hear about mundane subject matters, a tornado or earthquake or a cyclone, immediately we perk up. We want to hear this. And when we hear Srimad Bhagavatam, we go to sleep. Sometimes, some of us are sleeping, right? So, it should be the opposite way around. When we hear mundane subject matters, we say, well, I don't know, I don't want to hear that. I want to hear about Krishna. So you can read Krishna book and read here all the wonderful pastimes of the Lord, his Vrindavan pastimes, Dwarka pastimes, Mathura pastimes, and you can hear Srimad Bhagavatam glorifying different incarnations of the Lord. These things nourish our bhakti and will help us to go back home, back to Godhead. So we should not want to remain in this material world. Lord Chaitanya prayed, somehow or other, I've fallen into this material world. You, my dear Lord, you please pick me up and fix me as an atom at your lotus feet. So we should also desire to get out of this material world. But the devotee, he doesn't desire liberation. Liberation stands with folded hands in front of the devotee. He doesn't desire to emerge in Brahman, because this stifles his devotional service. This is like spiritual suicide. And a devotee doesn't accept any of the 5 kinds of liberation which can be offered also in Vaikuntha. But the devotee only wants pure devotional service so he can develop his love for Krishna, and at the end of this life he can go either where Lord Chaitanya is having his pastimes or where Lord Krishna is having his pastimes, enter into the Nitya Lila of the Lord and make his life successful. No more birth in this material world, which is a place of misery and suffering. No one can deny that they're not suffering, especially in Vrindavan, in the hot, when it's super hot, and or when it's cold, or when you have so many problems with the bodily problems. So suffering is there, but we have to tolerate these things because they're part of, when you have a material body, you're going to suffer in so many ways. But still, we should not let these things interfere. We should go on with our devotional practices, especially chant 16 rounds of the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, and follow the 4 regulated principles. In this way, become Krishna conscious. Hare Krishna. So I don't have any time for questions. You can ask me later. I have to do service now.